Hello and welcome to another episode of Aamchi Legends. Well, Aamchi Legends almost been almost a year. We had some fantastic guests on our show all through the last of the year. And now we commence, the year 22 episodes. And what a better guest to have, and an amazing guest joining me from Lucknow. Today is Mr. Nitin Gokarn, who is a 1990 batch IAS UP cadre officer. And today he's the Principal Secretary to Government of Uttar Pradesh. Hi, Nitin, and welcome to the Aamchi Legends.
Hi, thank you for inviting me into your show. Thank you.
So Nitin, I think one thing I've been very curious to know, what led you and Aamchi to move into an IAS kind of a field, which is very rare, right? And what is it that you can, there are so many youngsters who watch our show. What is it that amazing thing that one can look forward to in being in a government, IAS career?
See, I think I grew up in Mumbai, and at the time when I was growing up in Mumbai, if anybody had told me that, I leave Mumbai ever, I'd have laughed at him. I'd have said, no way. I'm not going to leave Mumbai ever. Or maybe go abroad, whatever, but not nothing less than Mumbai as far as India is concerned. But then I don't know. I started reading a lot of stuff, and I started realizing the kind of experience that India had as a country, and then one became more patriotic as time, as one read a lot of stuff about India, writings by Indians and some of the greats, including Nehru, Gandhi. And thing came to, let's see what happens. It was just, it was not that I wanted to, desperately become. It was, wanting to see where one can stand as far as competition is concerned. And believe you me, I never knew anybody who had ever been an IAS or an IPS officer at the time when I was applying for it, or neither did I know anybody who had cleared the exams, as it were, because Mumbai was far and remote from the UPSC scheme of things for most bikers.
True.
So it was just like, going to a library and sitting at the DISS library and running through the Gazette and seeing what portions one needs to, and what are the textbooks that are available. So no notes, nothing. It was just off the cuff, as it were.
Okay. So I do know that you've been in staying with your parents in Anushakti Nagar. That's where you grew up, and you have had I'm sure met people all across India who are part of that community out there. And I know Anushakti Nagar, you have everyone and anyone, and it's amazing to be around there playing sports. So what's been life like then, and now how it is now?
Well, life in Anushakti Nagar was very different because unlike Mumbai, Anushakti Nagar was very green. I still remember a lot of places where it was actual forest areas where we would go inside the forest and be exposed to a completely green environment, as it were. Something which is not unlike Mumbai. Mumbai is more of a concrete, so not much of greenery in most parts. Area. And a lot of huge playgrounds. So one could actually do a lot of physical activities, running around and stuff like that. So I think I grew up in that kind of an environment. It was more outdoorish, as it were, over there. I also shifted to Wadi around mid-70s. I think around 77, 78 when the emergency was around at that time. And was there in Wadi for about 5 odd years. But the only thing that one could do was probably go towards Marine Drive. That was the only open space that was in that sense. But naturally, one after having left Mumbai, that's when one realizes that an urban space is good as far as outdoor activity.
Okay, you did mention about Wadi. I'm sure it brings lots of memories. Any amazing memories that you can recall? I know it's the early 70s, but any memories of Talmakiwadi? I guess you stayed in building 17.
Yeah. I used to stay in building 17 on the ground floor. I have amazing memories of the Diwali celebration of the KSA those days. The kind of performances that we would look forward to. The sports activities of KSA as well, and also the visits of the Parinarasham Swamiji, then Mathadipati of Chitrapur Mutt. Some amazing fond recollections of those times, yes.
Okay. Coming back to your career, you have had some, you've all been, most part of your career, you have been in UP, now with the Public Works Department, and earlier Housing and Urban Planning. Also, you've been the Joint Secretary for the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, and also been into, mainly been into a state government kind of functions. So what are the challenges? We commoners look at it from a very different lens. But when it comes to government machinery, it's and I'm sure now things have changed over a period of time when you actually joined in. How was it then, and how is it now? Do you see a massive, positive outlook or a positive view from the general common public?
Well, I joined UP way back in '87. I was first in the police and then in the IS in 1990. 3 years again, it was same UP cadre. My impressions and our first impressions when I got married and I took my wife Sheila she's from Bangalore. So our first posting was in the IS in a place called Jalalabad. Now it's not the Afghanistan Jalalabad, there's Jalalabad, Shahjahanpur. The Afghanistan Jalalabad is of course more famous because of several writings on it.
Yeah.
Jalalabad was actually between Ganga and Ramganga, and 3 other Ganga. So I used to fondly call it the Punjab. That is the 5 rivers which go into this particular area, and there were, believe you me, there were no bridges there.
Wow.
So Jalalabad get cut off from the rest of the district for roughly 6 months in a year. And there were only pontoon bridges during the summers. Rest of the time, we had to actually go on horseback to do the administration and actually visit our tehsils, visit our stuff. So I've seen progress from that level. Today, you can do Jalalabad because of the lot of bridges that have come up. Now, of course, the Ganga Expressway, one of the nodes is going to be at Jalalabad. So life has actually changed. Another impression that I would give you is a place that we were posted in Kasya. Kasya is the place of the Mahaparinirvana of Buddha. Now, in those times, Kasya was way beyond, because it was beyond Gorakhpur, almost bordering Bihar, other side of Champaran. So for those of us, the generation of us who watched the movie Gandhi and seen the famous Champaran, life in those 90s wasn't much different from what is actually shown in the movie. And that's that was there prevalent in the early 90s as well. So from there, even to go to, let's say, to come home to either Mumbai or Bangalore meant that you would actually spend 3 nights in a train just to come to wherever. Today, life has changed. Today, there is a flight from Bangalore to Gorakhpur. You can land in 2 hours to Gorakhpur, and another half an hour you are in Kushinagar. Kushinagar is now national. That's the kind of that's evolved in the last. So although one looks at it, if you compare it to maybe an advanced country where we were 3 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades ago, and where we are today, there's a lot of progress. I look at it from what I've experienced. During monsoons in UP villages, you could not enter into the villages because there were no village roads within. For months, there should be complete as what we would call as kichad. So initially, it started having brick on edge, karanjas, which we would call. Today, most are having CC roads inside the villages. So you have to be in villages all through the year. That has all some lives. People have now able to come and go. People have access to motorcycles. So a lot of traffic is there in the villages. Also, the public initiatives has also changed. I mean, I remember that when I joined, an MLA would have probably a release jeep. Today, he travels not less than 3 Fortuners. So
wow,
that kind of innovation one has seen in the local areas in UP. Of course, and my UP is actually per capita income is 50% of what India is. So if you transfer UP, certainly India gets transformed.
Yeah, you've probably seen the as the cliched term, right? From the India to the Bharat, right? I mean, you've been most of your career now you're in the Bharat, and you really see that development happening. We too see it from a different lens, though. But I mean, India is really progressing in its own in the best of the way. So from a career standpoint, and I'm sure as many of our listeners are listening, not many Aamchi Bhanavs really look at IAS or IPS or essentially a UPSC as a career. Essentially could be one reason that the fact that most of us are either in the west or the south of India. Can you give us a bird's eye view of what this career is all about and what kind of one can look forward to as a bright career ahead?
See, if you want to work for your country, you want to work for your society, and you want to have varied experiences with each posting as a different job, then no match to the IS even today. Even I can say that after more than 3 decades. It used to be probably top of the mind for people in the north earlier, even before the private sector opened up in India. There were very few choices in the mid 80s at the point of time that I had looked upon this as a career. There was, for example, not much of IT or financial services at that point in time. So certainly a lot of exposure has happened in the private sector. That has also opened up. But private sector, ultimately, you work for a particular company or have a corporate. What is the social impact of that? You may earning money and transforming lives of millions through others, but are you actually looking at the lowest strata of society? If you look at what is the impact that your work is having to the general population, I think transformation of people's lives of whom you interact with, the IAS gives you that opportunity to change and interact with millions of people in the field throughout your career. Whatever decisions you impact lakhs and millions of people.
Yeah.
I look at it that if you are dedicated towards your your society or transformation and learning in each job as it were, because every assignment is every posting is different. It's like changing a job profile. I have spent maybe most of my career in UP, but I've also worked in the government of India for 12 years. I've worked in the board for 4.5 years. I worked in the government of India, my second tenure for 7 years. When you work in the government of India, your canvas becomes huge. You work at a pan-India level and you have an international exposure as well. Like coffee was the second largest trading commodity. I never knew till I joined Coffee Board. And the expertise that you develop in coffee itself. Tasting a coffee bean, and I would be able to tell you what bean it was, what kind of a roast it is, and whether it is washed, unwashed. You try to develop that sense of cupping, as it were, in coffee. So every assignment, you learn a lot, you interact with a lot of people, and it's the only job in India where you can interact right from the Honorable Prime Minister to the villager down in the villages who are the most marginalized sections of society and try and transform their lives. I think that opportunity no other job on the planet gives you as far as the IAS is concerned.
You mentioned about interaction with the Prime Minister. Have you had one, and what's been your experience?
Well, I've interacted with the current Honorable Prime Minister. I've interacted with Dr. Manmohan Singh. I've interacted with presidents, finance ministers, and all my experiences with the ministers. Every interaction is a learning experience. I thought that I amount, but then I realized that there's much more to it than this, and the kind of experience and exposure that they have at their level, kind of that they interact with, and the kind of perspectives that they have. Every interaction, you realize that there is more to it than just this much. So it's been a very big learning experience I think for all of us in the bureaucracy, because things transform very fast, things change very fast. 3 years ago, what was true is no longer true today. So a lot of things, technologies change, people have changed, systems have changed. So you have to be constantly learning whatever you're doing. So that I think comes out from each of these interactions that I have.
Yeah, you have had a fantastic stint at the Coffee Board, which essentially was a very government-centric, very coffee, which was like a commodity. And you were very much a part of that very active change that was done in the Coffee Board. Can you share something more about that?
I think I joined the Coffee Board in its post-liberalized era. That was what we called the LPG era. Before the LPG era of 92, 93, every bean of coffee had to be surrendered to the Coffee Board. They would do the cupping, and then they would pay for the coffee that you gave to the Coffee Board. And they would do the exports. They would also do the local Indian, through the Indian coffee houses across the country. They would sell coffee also locally within. Liberalization changed everything. Everything was up to the market. Everything became market driven. It also coincided with a rise in global coffee prices at that point in time. So whoever was in the coffee business, or was a grower or a planter, as they call themselves, the coffee planters actually made a lot of money, and they thought that the Coffee Board was exploiting them all this while, never knowing that the coffee price itself internationally had gone up.
Okay.
I joined in 2000. Unfortunate situation was that Vietnam came up with a huge bumper coffee production. Brazil also had a coffee huge production, and because of the huge supply that came into the market, coffee prices came to its historical low. It came down to its 100-year historical low. And suddenly people were exposed to the market forces, as it were, without having the safety net of the government completely.
Okay.
And a lot of planters had put up their money in real estate and several other undertakings that they had, and suddenly they felt the squeeze. They thought that the good times are good, not realizing that these market cycles, there are ups and downs. Nobody had educated. And it was at that point in time that the transformation in the industry also happened, because then you had to cut down on the flab. You had to become more to look at costs. And that's where the coffee board's whole expertise came in terms of its research, in terms of its extension services, in terms of ability to have local self-help groups so that they market their own produce. It was also at that point in time that we looked at a place in Andhra Pradesh which was Naxal affected, for example, the Arku Valley. Today, Arku Valley, you land up Visakhapatnam or Hyderabad, it's a specialty coffee. Absolutely. Those days it was denuded hillock. There was nothing growing there, and coffee was brought in, and the people were allotted, whoever was involved in the Naxal operations at that point in time. They were given lands, small plots of land, so they cultivate coffee under shade. Yeah, and that is now an exportable commodity. They have also become mainstream livelihoods based on coffee. So these are things that on the ground that happen.
I did read about, I was reading about your profile, and one of the most challenging tasks for you was in your very initial stint when you had the Mahakumbh of 1988. Maybe you can share something for our listeners as to how difficult it was when you really didn't have any mobile phone communication, etc.
Yeah, it was a different era. There was no mobile phone network at all. And there were not many jeeps also. In the entire Kumbh Mela area, possibly the SSP was the only guy who had a jeep. So all of us were on horseback. So you had to have a spare horse, and you had to have your, those days it was those wireless small sets that you would get. And because the battery usage was so high, you needed extra batteries to keep with you. So you would actually have batteries, 2-3 of which you would have given for charging, and the rest carry on yourself. And I've personally, even though I've seen the crowds and rush at Churchgate or VT in Mumbai, having seen the heads bobbing up and down, the kinds of crowds that I saw in the Kumbh Mela and the kind of people come from all across the country, where sitting on a horseback, you could only see heads bobbing up and down of a sea of humanity coming for their snan and leaving. Wow. And you also had to realize that, you have to facilitate the entire thing. Wherever it's like the principle of the water, if you stop the flow of the water anywhere, that's where the problem gets created. And that will lead to a stampede. So you had to prevent a stampede at any cost. So what you did was then, have extra zigzags made at different enclosures. So whenever the pressure increased, you would put them into the additional zigzags. But when exactly to do it, when not to do it, how do you communicate to the person when to open the zigzag, when not to do it? Also looking at the entry and exit points, like railway stations, bus stations, where the crowd would come. Then after the snan, they would want to go back. And unless you had enough trains, the railway stations would get overcrowded. All that had to be managed without cell phones. So that was
imagine. Yeah.
Real challenge. You can imagine how much of cross traffic there would have been on the networks.
Yeah. Last but not least, the question around our community. Have you, you've been in UP, or rather Lucknow, for a number of years now. Have you really been in touch with our community, or it's been difficult keeping pace?
No, I'm actually very, very closely associated with the MUT and the MUT activities. Swami or two every year, almost at least a couple of times, or at least once a year, I have his darshan. With the Tristali Yatra that took place in the north, and also the Badrinath Yatra with Swamiji. Also the MUT property that came up in Kashi, in Varanasi. I've written in the KSA as to how it all went about, and today the MUT has a place in Kashi at the Ghat itself. So that also stated. And of course, a lot of people I keep interacting with whenever I go to Shirali or Karla. almost once a year I go to Gokarn and do pujas there.
That's nice.
So all the mutts, the Samadhi mutts at Mallapur or Mangalore, Karla, I keep visiting.
Thank you. That's great. So Nitin, thank you so much for sparing time. I mean, it's a Sunday, very busy week, I'm sure, ahead for you. But thank you so much once again for joining on Aamchi Legends. You've been an inspiration to a lot of our viewers. That's how actually a lot of people requesting me, is there a way you can talk to Mr. Gokarn and have him interviewed? And I'm so glad you agreed in a jiffy. So thank you once again so much for joining on the Aamchi Legends.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the very best to all your viewers. Thank you.
And well, with that, we come to the end of this episode of the Aamchi Legends. Many thanks to Samiir Halady, who arranged this and has been conceptualized this Aamchi Legends show. Once again, from me, Santosh Sirur, and our guest this morning, Mr. Nitin Gokarn. Thank you once again for joining on Aamchi Legends. Bye-bye.
Bye.